All right, time for another Can They Make the Playoffs video. I've done a series of these. You can scroll back over the last few weeks and find them. I think I did Southern Cal, Florida State, Tennessee. I've done several of them up today. Notre Dame. This is based on an article that ESPN put out a couple of weeks ago. They went through their top 25 teams at the time and basically wrote like a little paragraph of what each of those teams would need to do in order to make the playoffs. Now, some of it's ridiculous, especially when you get down to certain teams ranked really, really low. There's just no chance of making the play. I mean, it doesn't really matter what it. Basically, it should just say, what does this team need to do to make the playoffs? Nothing. There's nothing they can do. They're not making it. But for a lot of these teams, I mean, I'm of the opinion that in any given year, typically there's 10 to 15 teams that I think have realistic aspirations, maybe, of making a playoff. Outside of that, I'm not so sure. They've got Notre Dame in their top 15. What do they have? 12 or 13, something like that, in this ranking on ESPN that this article was based off of. And according to this article, in order for Notre Dame to make the playoffs, a couple of things have to happen. Both of them on the offensive side of the ball. Again, this is according to the article, and then I'm going to give you some of my thoughts about Notre Dame. Sam Hartman. They brought Sam Hartman in, or they bring Sam Hartman in from Wake Forest, prolific passer in the ACC the last couple of years. This is a huge upgrade at quarterback for Notre Dame, in my opinion, over anything they've had in recent memory, including the years they actually went to the playoffs. Now, I don't know how many people remember, but Notre Dame has actually made the playoffs twice. More on that in a second when we talk about their schedule this year. So Sam Hartman's going to have to play great, right? He's going to have to do what he did at Wake Forest, which is basically light up almost every team he plays. You go back and look at the Clemson game last year. I think he threw 6 touchdown passes, whatever the case. Now, Notre Dame beat Clemson last year without Sam Hartman, but that's neither here nor there. So this is obviously an upgrade for Notre Dame at the quarterback position, and Sam Hartman's going to have a really good year, and I agree with that. If Notre Dame's got any shot of making the playoffs. Now, in order for Sam Hartman to have a good year, he's got to have some wide receivers. And this is another point the article makes. Notre Dame's got some talented wide receivers. How talented are they? I'm not so sure. They're unproven, is the point the article mentions. And I agree. If you look back at what Notre Dame's issues kind of have been, even the years they've made the playoffs and what's held them back, it's been explosive passing games, in my opinion. It's been lack of production at the quarterback position and lack of big-name explosive wide receivers, I think. This is one of the reasons Notre Dame fans didn't mind so much when Brian Kelly left to go to LSU. The recruiting had gotten kind of stale in a lot of people's opinion. Notre Dame was recruiting pretty well in terms of rankings nationally, generally top 15, some top 10 classes even. But if you look at the players they were recruiting, it was very few dynamic impact players on the outside offensively or at quarterback. And in my opinion, some in the secondary as well. Notre Dame has tended to have pretty good lines of scrimmage, especially offensive lines of scrimmage, putting offensive linemen in the NFL every single year. They've had good tight ends. They've had a few good running backs here and there. They've really lacked at the quarterback position, explosive playmakers on the outside, and some of the skill positions defensively as well. That's been some of the harder positions for Notre Dame to recruit for whatever reason. Now, Marcus Freeman comes in. He had another pretty good recruiting class for Notre Dame. In my opinion, no real jump or increase over what Brian Kelly was doing. Another good class, another top 15-ish class for Notre Dame in recruiting. But again, they miss out on some key targets. Two in particular, the two highest rated players Notre Dame was going after. They missed out on them. These are the two players, both of these impact, right away, immediate impact type players, and they miss out of them. So that doesn't have a whole lot to do with this year. You don't rely too much on true freshmen in any given year, although every once in a while you'll have one or two maybe that stand out. So the article mentions nothing defensively about Notre Dame. I would add secondary play to the list on ESPN of things that Notre Dame's got to do this year if they want to make the playoffs. Do I think Notre Dame will make the playoffs this year? No. No, they're not. Like it or not, until we expand to 12 teams, Notre Dame has got to go 12-0 to make the playoffs. That's not a rule. It's not written down anywhere. That's just an opinion that Uncle Lou has. And so far, it's an opinion that has been proven accurate. The 2 seasons that Notre Dame made the playoffs, they were 12-0. As long as Notre Dame continues to choose, and that's the key word, choose, it is a choice that Notre Dame is actively making to avoid a 13th game, to avoid a conference title game by refusing to join a conference. As long as they maintain that principle. As long as they stay out of a conference and therefore only have 12 games, they're going to have to go 12-0 to get into a 14 playoff. Again, that's not a rule. It's of course completely possible that an 11-1 Notre Dame could finish in the top 4 in that final playoff ranking. I just don't think it will ever happen. This is the last year for it to happen. This is the last year of the 14 playoff. It's not going to happen. If you look at Notre Dame's schedule, games against Southern Cal, Ohio State, Clemson, Pitt, I believe NC State. Now, Notre Dame on any random Saturday may be capable of beating any of those teams. They're not beating them all in the same season. It's just not happening. It's not going to happen. I do expect Marcus Freeman to take a big step forward as a head coach in year 2. You see that a lot, especially from good coaches. And I do think Marcus Freeman is a good coach. It's to be seen whether or not he's ever going to be a great head coach. We don't know. He's only been the head coach there 1 year. He's only been a head coach anywhere for 1 year. Ups and downs last year, early season losses to Marshall and Stanford that were just unexplainable and unacceptable losses. But you do see that from time to time with first-year head coaches, especially first-year head coaches who have never even been a head coach anywhere else before. I mean, you can make the argument that Kirby Smart is the best coach in college football today. He's at least the second best coach in college football today, even for people who hate him. And things did not actually start out too great for him at Georgia in his first year ever as a head coach. He lost to 2 train wrecks known as Vanderbilt and Georgia Tech. I mean, it didn't go well for Kirby Smart in year 1. So what you do in year 1 as a head coach, record-wise, is not necessarily an indication of your future. Now, there's obvious different. I mean, Kirby Smart went on to play for a national title in his second year. Notre Dame's not going to do that. They're just not there yet. Notre Dame's got some other issues, lost their offensive coordinator. And while I don't necessarily think losing their offensive coordinator was a bad thing, because I didn't like Tommy Rees. He wasn't very good last year. Notre Dame fans didn't like Tommy Rees. They were kind of happy to see him go. That's not really the issue. It's what happened with the offensive coordinator coaching search after Tommy Rees was fired, right? You bring in 2 or 3 guys. The one you want has a huge buyout. You know he has a buyout. You basically offer him the job. I mean, you're parading him around at basketball games and everything. And it turns out Notre Dame doesn't want to pay the buyout. Now, I know Notre Dame disputes that now. But look, whatever happened with that, it wasn't good. And they end up promoting a tight ends coach that no one's ever heard of to offensive coordinator. Now, maybe this guy's the next great offensive coordinator. I don't know. Maybe he's the next genius offensive mind. I don't know. But he wasn't Notre Dame's first choice. He wasn't his second choice, third choice, or fourth choice. It was what Notre Dame was sort of left over with after they completely, in my opinion, botched the search for offensive coordinator. It was just the Notre Dame search for offensive coordinator, in my opinion, the second most embarrassing thing that happened in college football this offseason. Number 1, of course, is Florida's handling of the Jalen Rashada name, image, and likeness situation was just a complete circus, just a complete comedy show down there in Gainesville. The second most embarrassing thing was Notre Dame's search for offensive coordinator. I do think Notre Dame will be a good team in 2023. I think they'll be a better team than they were last year, based solely on the fact that Sam Hartman is going to be playing quarterback. I am a buyer in Sam Hartman. I watched what he did at Wake Forest, and people can talk about the ACC and it's weak, and he put up big numbers against bad teams. There was some of that. I'll give you that. But how come every quarterback in the ACC didn't put up those numbers? And go back and watch last year's game against Clemson, which I don't care what you think about the ACC or Clemson or whatever. Clemson had a good defense last year. Now, we can argue whether it was great or not, and I don't think Clemson's defense was as good as it should have been last year. But Clemson's defense was still really, really good last year, and Sam Hartman carved them up. This will be the best quarterback Notre Dame's had in a while. I do think that will make a difference. I don't think it'll make enough of a difference for Notre Dame to make a playoff, though. So, of the teams I've talked about so far, which, like I said, I think was Tennessee, Southern Cal, Florida State. There may be one more that I'm leaving out. Did I do Ohio State? I don't remember. Let me know down below, by the way, if there's another team you want to hear me talk about in terms of this playoff, what they need to do to make the playoffs thing. I'll be happy to do a few more of these if you let me know down below what teams you'd like to hear me rant and rave incoherently about for 10 minutes or whatever. Of the teams I've done so far, though, I'm most certain about Notre Dame not making the playoffs compared to any other team. In other words, I think there's a better chance, for example, Tennessee could make it than Notre Dame. I think there's a better chance Southern Cal could make it than Notre Dame. I think there's a better chance Florida State could make it than Notre Dame. And the reason is, while I don't think any of those other teams I mentioned can go 12-0, those other teams will have an opportunity to go 12-1. Notre Dame will not, because they're not going to play a 13th game. Any of those other teams I mentioned could potentially lose one game in the regular season and still make the playoffs, whereas Notre Dame cannot. I just don't think the playoff committee is going to put a 11-1 team who doesn't play in its conference title game if it's Notre Dame, because they're actively choosing to avoid that 13th. Actively choosing to avoid that 13th game. Now, once we go to 12-team playoffs, Notre Dame's going to be in almost every single year, right? And I mean, they're going to be a top 15-ish team almost every year, or at least have the potential to be a top 15 team almost every single year. So you're going to have to wait one more year, though. I don't see Notre Dame going 12-0. Don't see it. Southern Cal, Ohio State, Clemson. It's hard for me to imagine Notre Dame beating all three of those teams. And then, I admittedly a rung below that, Pitt, NC State, so a couple of other tough games too. And a couple of those are on the road, which won't be easy. So I do think Notre Dame will be good. I'm in wait-and-see mode on Marcus Freeman. I'm not holding last year against him completely. Yeah, it was no excuse losing to Marshall and Stanford. But I'm not going to hold that completely against him as a first-year head coach, first time ever being a head coach. They got rid of Tommy Rees. That's good. Completely botched the coordinator searching position, coach position search. That's bad. Don't know anything about this guy they're bringing in. Has never been an OC before, tight end coach. We'll see. I still think Notre Dame needs help on the outside at wide receiver in that schedule. And because Notre Dame avoids the 13th game, I don't think they're going 12-0. I don't think they're getting in. Just my opinion. Anyway, Rudy was offsides.